I do think there's a little bit that's still lacking on the defensive side. And I do think there are still, for me, questions about conditioning overall. Welcome to another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. I am your host, Matt Thomas, joined by my co-host and best friend, Justin Goodrum. Justin, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. I'm feeling unusually patriotic. I know that's kind of blasphemy to say, but really, sports doesn't give me that patriotic feeling. But just right after the Olympics, feeling very, very patriotic. Just in terms of, how can you not, right? If you're just an Olympic fan, let alone just watching the men's and women's basketball team. So really got all the feels just watching it. How are you, man?
Right on, man. Hey, nothing wrong with that. Hey, we live in America. We want America to do well. I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah, very, very pleased with the U.S. getting the job done, getting the gold medal feels kind of like a relief, maybe a little bit more so than totally celebratory, but either way, a celebration is in order and has certainly begun. So congrats to Team USA, both the men's and the women's team securing the gold. It's pretty awesome to see. Congrats to them. I'm doing well, Justin. It is windy and humid and hot in Albuquerque, so my swamp cooler is not working. You can see I've got like a nice little glisten going on my forehead here as a result. So cooking a little bit in the house here, but doing well. Can't complain. Before we get into our discussion today, and we do have a lot to cover, I wanted to give a shout out to the listeners. We had more subscribers since our last In the Lab episode. So really appreciate you all joining in on the show and the conversation tied to the show. As always, tell a friend. We really appreciate your referrals and recommendations. It helps the show more than you know. And if you want to check this out, if you are just catching this via the algorithm, please help us out by hitting subscribe. You can also check out our podcast feed anywhere you like to listen to podcasts and our social media, Hoopsology Pod. So, Justin, let's jump into our topics. We have a lot to get to, so I don't want to delay any further. We're going to be covering some of this Olympics reaction real quickly, the semifinals and finals. And then we're going to talk to a topic that I always enjoy every year and really enjoyed last year, ranking the current top 10 players in the league. So kind of a snapshot of where the players are right now in our opinions. And I think we'll have a lot of good discussion around the current state of the league based on going through our list and talking through it. But Justin, let's start with the Olympics. You definitely watched more of the play-by-play in the moment than I did. I caught a good amount, but Justin, you definitely had your ears on the street, so to speak, watching friend of the show, Noah Eagle, and maybe someday friend of the show, Dwayne Wade, you never know, going off on the broadcast and announcing through the Olympics journey on the basketball side of things. So give me your thoughts on, end of the day, getting through and winning gold. Give us your thoughts just overall.
Yeah. I think, at least for me, this was a fantastic commercial for FIBA basketball and international rules, because I was convinced. I became a true believer of international rules over what we're currently seeing in the NBA. That's what stood out to me. Number one, I thought the games moved quicker, way more entertaining. Not a lot of just melodrama with tons of fouls, players playing physical, and lots of action. We clearly saw that the three ball being pretty consistent, and really just, we talk about for fans complaining about the All-Star game. I think this was more than made up for it, because basically we got an All-Star game like almost every game with the United States, depending on who they were playing. And we got to see all these stars that, fans normally complain about in February playing hard. All of a sudden they're playing for something, and playing for something that matters together as a unit. And that was fantastic to see. So I was wonderfully entertained, enjoyed Kevin Durant's performance, LeBron's performance. I think we're going to get to that, at least for me, get to that later. It's going to factor into this top 10 player list. But it was just very interesting to see a lot of these players that we hear about being considered past their prime or they should retire. And then Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James, they kill it in this tournament. So I thought that was really fascinating to see. And shout out the other teams too as well. South Sudan, France, Germany, Serbia, um, Canada. Just, I think for the first time, if you are actually watching basketball, you're actually into a lot of these other international teams in terms of who's going to win this tournament. And I think that's awesome. And I think just thinking about it now, wouldn't it be great to see, 20 years from now, even maybe shorter time, the attention that the World Cup gets in soccer, apply that to basketball. Can you imagine just seeing, you know, all these nations, and that would really grow the game in terms of having FIBA World Cups. So instead of having, a dead time during the summertime, normally you would get a lot of excitement for international play besides the Olympics. So I'm rambling on, but overall, really enjoyed the Olympics, men's and women's. Shout out to the women too. Shout out to the women's France team as well, almost sitting at the overtime, but the foot was on the line. But fantastic just to see both performances. How about you?
Yeah, pretty impressive also that the men's and women's side of the game both had USA and France
Yeah,
making it to the championship. Pretty awesome little feather in the cap for both of those countries. And I agree with a lot of the sentiments. You know that I share those opinions about FIBA ball. The other point, when you're looking at realistic solutions to the real problems, in my opinion, that are present in the NBA game as is currently constructed, we're not going away from 82 games, it seems,
no,
because of all the money that you make from that. But like you said, having a faster, quicker, slightly shorter each quarter version of basketball that FIBA provides, I think would be a great format to take to the NBA. And then it also is preparing you for that style of play when you do move into those World Cup series and the Olympics, when the Olympics are present. So, yeah, I agree with a lot of those things. I love seeing, like Nicholas Batum, for example, on France. Like you have these veteran NBA players that Scola was one for Argentina as well, Luis Scola. Uh, Veteran players that, probably borderline don't belong in the NBA anymore, but are making huge impacts for their countries and growing the game there. I think that's really awesome to see. And I also love the other side of it too, that you get a lot of guys that are not NBA level talent potentially, but this is like a big stage for them to maybe get noticed and maybe elevate their game to the point they could have a fringe shot at that. There were some players on Serbia and France that kind of were drawing some of that conversation and interest. And I think that's just a really cool human element of the Olympic game too, that everyone kind of relates to, is that, wow, you have this one shot here where you have this big spotlight of the Olympic Games. And it was a big spotlight. I don't know if you saw, but the ratings for the Olympic finals, the
yeah,
gold medal finals, were insane. I think it was 19.5 million viewers, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know if those numbers are totally final. So may even be bigger than that, and not capturing everything that actually goes into the game. When you consider social media posting, all that stuff. But I digress. A lot of fun with these Olympics, and I like that it was close. I think it's a little bit weird given you are simultaneously weighing, well, this was touted as the second greatest American team of all time by many. I don't know if that's true or not, and to be honest, I need to do more homework on that before I give uh, a realistic opinion on that. I know I don't have them on par with the 92 team. Maybe you do, maybe some people do, and maybe that's warranted. Again, I need to do more homework on that. But you have that level of talent on the American side, which is the greatest country in his history in terms of basketball to this point,
easily.
um, weighing that against how difficult these games were to win. Serbia, difficult to get through. France, difficult to get through. Steph Curry bailed out the team essentially with his magnificent three-point shooting. Kind of cool to see, since this was his one and only Olympics, seeing him come through in the clutch, which if you know the narrative on Steph Curry, that has always been a knock in his game is how Steph plays in the clutch. So to reverse that curse and be the catalyst for this team winning the gold, in my opinion, is really awesome to see as well.
No, I agree. I think in terms of comparing eras, that's already hard with the NBA, but internationally, I mean, look at the competition that we currently saw in 2024 compared to 1992. I mean, with this different rule set, I mean, that's just extremely hard. I mean, that's dicey territory just to compare. I mean,
Competition, no doubt, is a lot better
I
nowadays.
mean,
Yeah.
it's tough. I mean, virtually the USA had no competition, but in 1992. But at the same time, you're considering, some of the greatest players who ever played. Now, if you take a look at 2024, look at the age, right? Like Magic Johnson passes prime, Larry Bird passes prime, really Jordan, Barkley. But and you compare it to 2024, three of the guys that's considered past or primes. I mean, they
Much
carried him.
older than
They're
those
much
guys
older.
when
Yeah,
they played on the 92 team.
and
Yeah.
look how they're playing. I mean, you can argue. I mean, Steph Curry put on two of the most spectacular performances we ever seen, and you look at Durant and how he played well, and you look at LeBron ever since the exhibition. I mean, he didn't look past his prime to me in any of those games. So it's tough to really compare eras. I mean, I don't know. Somebody more knowledgeable in basketball than me can do that because that's a heavy task to determine who's the best USA team ever. I mean,
Well, the other thing too that's confounding that needs to be mentioned, and I don't want to go too much longer on Olympic talk
sure.
because we got a lot to discuss. I've one more thing after this, but the other thing that needs to be discussed as well is the proficiency around the world at the 3-point shot
Yeah.
at this point in time now, because you didn't have a team going against the U.S. in '92 other than maybe just Tony Kukoc alone, and he wasn't a tremendous 3-point shooter, but Serbia caught fire from the 3-point line. France has players that are proficient 3-point shooters. It was a little bit of a weakness for them compared to what the U.S. brought to the table, but that does make things a little bit more difficult to judge in terms of how close the competitiveness of the game is when you have the U.S. favored by 16 plus points against Serbia, but Serbia goes on fire for that game for large stretches at a time, just throws a wrench in the whole thing. Some of that, in the case of Olympic basketball, that was a great thing with the 3-point shot, adding that variability and actually making games more competitive. In the NBA, Justin, you and I both saw and both talked about on our show how the playoffs were a disappointment because there were way too many blowouts. So you can see how it can create a beneficial fire for the game of basketball, and it can also burn you in the game of basketball depending on how the shot is applied. I would say in the Olympics it was a very good thing.
Well, I think it shows that I think the 3-point shot can be an asset. And I think in terms of the actual playoffs, I think it's drawn out. I've been totally against having 7 games, period. I think to me, I know that I would lose this. I would lose in terms of this being a favor. I'd be down for single elimination, sudden death. I know
Mm.
that's impossible, but to me, I think a happy medium would be best out of 3 in the first and second round, and then you do best out of 5. Going into the later rounds, and I would keep it as that. I would not go
Mm.
7 games. I hate the 7-game format. It's just so drawn out, and it just gives teams the ability to lose. Like they're just cool of losing the first game, and they're cool with giving up home court advantage. Who cares? Like you have LeBron or Steph Curry, it's like, is home court really that important? Like it's not that big of a deal to lose. So
Mm.
compared to, I think, in FIBA rules and kind of this group format, and then go into single elimination. Like if you lose, it's over. You never know what's going to happen in one game. It creates that excitement. So similarly to March Madness. So to me, I'm for that because I just think drawing it out. I think this gives teams the ability just to not play as hard, in my opinion.
That's well said, and that is a problem. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but
Sure.
you're right. That is a
Yeah.
problem with the league, that it feels like almost no game has weight associated to it. It is not impactful because you always just have another game down the road where you can catch up. You can have teams fall into a hole like the Lakers did 2 years ago, and then
Yeah.
they still have time to climb out of that hole in terms of the regular season and get back into things. Same thing with the playoffs. You can go down by 2 games, and yeah, your percentage chance of coming back is a lot lower, but it's still quite possible, especially if you have a very talented player that's coming off of injury or something along those lines. Justin, quickly, I wanted your thoughts. This actually has drawn up controversy on multiple fronts, and I think there's multiple angles you can go with this. And I think that even includes being happy with the result that was decided. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the Olympic MVP. It went to LeBron James. He had some impressive averages when you look at the typical things we look at in terms of points, rebounds, assists. When you look at what actually happened in crunch time and how impactful Steph Curry was, a lot of people pulling for Steph Curry to be the MVP. A lot of people also questioning players from other countries and how deserving they may or may not have been. What were your thoughts on the Olympic MVP? And how much does it even matter in the first place?
I'm not too outraged by it, to be honest. I mean, has this been a controversy in previous Olympics? Who gets the MVP? I can't remember that in terms of like a national outrage. So I don't know. I mean, take your pick. I mean, Steph Curry before the Serbia and the game against France, I don't think he played particularly well. But it's so tough because with the lineups, it kind of goes to the Jason Tatum controversy, and people are outraged. And I think there's even I forgot who it was that's saying they're going to boycott. I think it was David Portnoy. He was like, "I'm going to boycott not watching the gold medal game because Jason Tatum's not in there." It's just,
And
dude,
then he totally watched it.
yeah, and not only that, if they played him and they were to lose, what would you say then? It'd be like, oh well, they played him too much. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I think it's preference. Jokic played really well. He had a spectacular tournament, so I think that's where I have seen the most outrage. But I'm not too upset about this. I mean, I don't think we're going to be really thinking about this 2 months from now. So
Well, Justin, you have definitely seen my Twitter then, because I am adamant that Jokic was cheated out of another MVP. He led the tournament in points, assists,
you
rebounds. So if
did.
you want to go that route, you can argue there. I think it's also fair to argue that Serbia was the overachievement, a team of the Olympics in its entirety. Like, they shouldn't have beaten the US. They didn't beat the US, but they only lost by 4, and they led for most of that game when they really on paper should not have been in that at all. And of course we know that Jokic was a big reason why they were in that. And then they also had no business beating Germany in the bronze medal game, but they do that and they win by 10 points. I think that is far more entertaining. Well, not only entertaining in some respects, but far more admirable and appreciable than what the US did, in spite of the US winning the gold. So it, I can see a lot of people are going to say, Matt, you have to give the MVP to a player on the team that wins gold. I disagree. When that team on gold, basically everyone is averaging 10 to 15 points per game, or not even. I think the highest point per game was Steph Curry with 14.8 or something like that points per game. So very balanced overall, and the team that is stacked top to bottom against teams that maybe at most have 2 stars, star-ish. If you're talking like Germany, France definitely had legitimate stars, but Serbia, pretty bare bones outside of Jokic. So my opinion, that is the rightful Olympic MVP. Now, Justin, you know me, and of course I'm gonna digress and back off by saying, no, I'm not outraged. I get it. But if I had to pick, if I had to vote, it's Jokic.
I see what you're saying. I like you said, I don't want to dwell too much on this, but look at any NBA when I think that year where the Golden State Warriors won the title against Cleveland, who was the MVP? Andre Iguodala, who did not deserve it. LeBron deserved it. So, I mean, this is a track record that's been going on, I think, all through basketball in terms of who gets the MVP. It's weird because the NHL, I think the losing team, I forgot, don't ask me about my hockey knowledge, but I think the losing team, their player got MVP of
You're right. You're
at the
right.
final. So that has happened in hockey. I wish that sentiment was shared with the Olympics and the NBA.
Yeah. And it's funny because we talk a lot about greatness and accomplishment on this podcast. And I think that is so important to analyze that correctly. It's part of the reason we're about to jump into this top 10 ranking thing that we're going into. I think it's an important discussion, but I don't, based on the term most valuable player, I don't think you necessarily have to be the winning player to win an MVP. So let us know your guys' thoughts. I don't want to dwell on this any longer. That's 20 solid minutes on the Olympics coverage there. Was Jokic the MVP? Was LeBron the rightful MVP? A lot of people will be standing for LeBron. And look, I don't say my Jokic take as a spite to LeBron or Curry or KD or any of the American players. They had great tournaments. Kudos to them again for bringing home the gold for our home country of USA.
A quick break from In the Lab to request a favor. If you love the chats with Matt and I, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video. Also, by doing that, you get all of our back interviews featuring commentators from the WNBA and the NBA, our interviews with PA announcers, and our interviews with journalists from SB Nation, NBC Sports, and The Athletic, and a lot more. Again, please subscribe. Thanks, and now back to In the Lab.
So let's move forward, get into our main topic for the episode today. Like I said in the intro, it's a topic that I love. We are going to be ranking the top 10 players in the NBA currently. So again, think of a present day snapshot. You have just the 2024 to 2025 season in sight. How are you going to draft players? How are you going to pick players, rank players? Who is most likely maybe to help lead you to a title in this upcoming season? That's where we're going with this list. I'm excited because in our brief conversation where we didn't reveal anything to each other, it sounds like we're going to have some differences in opinion here. We're going to start like we did last year at the very top of our list. So number one on our list, and then we'll see what kind of variance we get as we go up the list. So Justin, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you to give me your number one ranked player for, again, the 2024-2025 season.
Yeah, we just talked about him. I picked Nikola Jokic. I just think his versatility, the way he's grown, obviously he's leading his teams to a championship. His previous stats last season, about 26 points per game, leading the Nuggets, all the way with a 57 win record. And I just think his versatility, and it's one of those things, correct me if I'm wrong, you get a different appreciation of watching him in person than on television. It's weird. It's a weird situation because you're watching the same thing, but it's in two different mediums. But when you see him in person, you just realize how he's playing four-dimensional chess out there. Like the way his mind works is it's very similar, I think, to LeBron, but Jokic plays under the rim, which I think I have that feelings about LeBron early in his career about Jokic, but it's different because he's more of a post player. So I think starting a franchise in terms of who would be the best to build your core around would be Jokic because he's so unselfish. He's so aware. He's so smart, and he's been in so many different situations, and he's so fundamentally sound, and he's not rattled by a lot of things that happen on the court that it's hard to pick anybody above him.
Yeah, 100% agreement there. The other 2 points I'll add, the playoff flameout for the Nuggets really didn't put any negative shine on Jokic for me. No. It more brought up questions about his supporting cast and how consistent they will be in supporting Jokic in this next campaign. Jokic still stays at the top for my list as well. We have agreement there. The other thing I'll say about seeing him in person is you also realize how giant and how much of a monster that man is too. under the
Yeah.
basket, seeing actual post play like that, which is something, that, as we all know, in the modern NBA, and even Jokic, he's not always what you would look at as like kind of a traditional post player, but he can play big and inside there, which is an option that a lot of teams don't have with their centers nowadays.
Yeah.
So dude's a monster. Dude's still number one for us. Justin, I'm going to go ahead and cut in line here, and I'll lead off with number 2 on my list. This is a little tough, but I still, in factoring two-way play, which I care a lot about, as you do too, I'm going to go with Giannis here in this number 2 spot. I'm a little bit biased because I, I'm loyal to Giannis. I really like Giannis. We've had 2 bad injuries that have kept Giannis and the Bucks as a disappointment the past 2 seasons. I still think if you look at his workload and what he was doing over the course of the regular season, I still have to give it to him to number 2. This is kind of one of those situations where this rank is sort of pending. And if we get another bad postseason performance, he's going to likely decline on my list, especially with all the good up and comers that we have in the league right now that I'm sure we'll discuss many of them. So Justin, if you have any quick reactions to my number 2 of Giannis, and then please give us your number 2.
Yeah, that's the reason why he's not my number 2, is to your point, his injury concerns. Big many injuries scares me because I think they're more susceptible for longer term damage compared to a guard. So, and it's weird because I wonder why that's the case. I mean, look at Durant. Is people say he's 7 foot tall and he suffered a pretty devastating injury, and yet I don't think I've seen any drop off from him in terms of his performance on the court. So I am curious, is it the post play? Like, why are they more susceptible to just these injuries affecting them, their career longer term? I mean, compared to Durant, who plays more like a guard, but he's just as tall. So I find that fascinating.
I think just simply too, sorry, just real quick,
Yeah, sure.
the overextension of Giannis, like
Sure.
less depth on that roster. Giannis
Sure.
has to be responsible for more. Hopefully they can kind of correct that next season. I'm sorry. Give us your
Yeah.
number 2.
My number 2, and I was really hesitant about this, but I'm just a true fan of his game, and I think we saw him really grow last season, even though they didn't win the championship, was Luka Doncic. I
Oh,
am
Luka.
a huge believer in him. I think he has had clutch moments. Varies like the criticism that we heard about Steph Curry early in his career. I think Luka has answered it in terms of his, clutch moments in a Dallas Mavericks team that I think was vastly, I would say, undermanned and really overperformed to go to the NBA Finals. He was a big key in making that happen. So his, 33 points, had 2,300 points total. Just a unbelievable run for him, and really, I think crossed that threshold of getting into that superstar status. I mean, the bummer is that the pretty much the Boston Celtics handled him in the NBA Finals, but I think it shows with the Mavericks, if they put a concrete core around him, along with Kyrie Irving, they are going to be a perennial Western Conference power. I think that proved it with Luka with his run.
Awesome. Yeah, we have big difference here. It's going to be a little longer before I mention Luka
Sure,
that
he has a bunch of flaws.
you all may be surprised to hear.
Yeah,
I think my criticism would be seeing the blow bys in the playoffs and things like
sure,
that. There are, on the one hand, he has good size, like good functional size for basketball, where he can shove around and get his way. He can also handle some abuse, like if he's guarding someone. But I do think there's a little bit that's still lacking on the defensive side, and I do think there are still, for me, questions about conditioning overall. And I don't think it's entirely fair in the playoffs, because you and I both know he was not right, and he made it to the finals in spite of not
yeah,
being right. So I want to give him props for that. I want to give him some credit that is rightfully deserved for that. But for me right now, a little too one dimensional to put him in the number 2 slot.
I get it.
I will say in this league, the way it's constituted right now and the way things work, you're absolutely correct about the Mavericks' success. And even though I don't have him here, I don't think it's a bad pick. We'll go ahead and keep going snake draft style with this. So if you want to give us your number 3 as well.
Yeah, I'll be pretty short because I gave my thoughts about him earlier. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 30 points, total points. It's about 2,200 rebounds per game. Sorry, rebounds, total rebounds last season, about 803. In April 9th of this year, suffered a calf injury. Like we mentioned, big men injuries, and I'll get to this with Embiid because I have some harsh things I want to say about him, and particularly about the Olympics. But with Giannis, I just think the injuries really scare me, and he is such a core player to the Bucks. Without him, the Bucks are, I would say, pretty mediocre, and they
Oh,
have to,
yeah.
and that's just because of Damian Lillard and Chris Middleton. So to me, their injuries really scare me about Giannis. But when he's healthy, similarly to Embiid, I mean, they are pretty unstoppable in terms of what they can offer.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know if the Bucks are a playoff team without
Fair.
Giannis on, on their
Yeah, you're
roster, even
fair.
with Damian Lillard
Sure.
thrown into the mix. Yeah, well said. My number 3, I'm going to go with someone who I introduced just barely on the list last year. The hardcore listeners will remember, but he has already leapfrogged to number 3 on the list, even leapfrogging Luka on my list, and that is Shea Gilgeous Alexander. I love what he's bringing to the table as a playmaker. He's not a liability on the defensive end. I think he actually does a pretty good job and sneakily a little bit more sizable for his position than people give him credit for. Uh, and I love, of course, what the Thunder are doing. And he is leading the way with that team. He is the crux of their success. So I'm giving this to SGA. And I do think I don't know if you remember, Justin, but there was briefly a moment where there was this as a talking point, SGA versus Luka, who you got. And I think that came up on Inside the NBA, if I'm not mistaken. And it, I think it's much more of a real debate than it was at the start of last season. And I'm curious to see where that goes and if SGA can carry more momentum. There's no doubt Luka, in terms of dominating on the offensive side of the game, Luka's got the edge on Shea. But I think with the athleticism and other things, and on the defensive end as well, factoring that in, I have SGA just beating Luka out right now.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I think I felt weird about having SGA high on my list, but after hearing your reasonings, it made me validated my reasoning of him being that high. I agree with you. I think he's going to be a surefire star in this league, and I think it has proved, last season seeing the Thunder with the maturation process, right? Like a lot of, I think with Luca, I think there's a little bit of a struggle with the Dallas Mavericks to finally get them to this point to where they can be an elite team. I think with SGA, that time's going to be much shorter with him. I really do believe. So I think you're right. It's going to be much more contentious between him and Luka, no doubt. With his resume previously last season.
And I do think OKC, they're going to be a favorite in the West, and I think that's
Yeah.
fair with how hard they're going to continue to try during the regular season and with them being so young. But I do think they still have a lot of development to do, and they certainly did last season when SGA led them to that 1 seed. He makes up for a lot of flaws on that team, and he is also the kind of glue guy and leader of that roster all at the same time. So I'll go ahead and move right into my number 4 pick. This won't take very long because we've talked about him. And I also kind of hinted at SGA just edging him. I've got Luka here. I don't know if I can see an argument or accept an argument that has Luka any lower than a top 5 player. He has been a dominant force. He was great for the Mavericks last year. There are still those questions that I brought up earlier, in terms of defense and conditioning that I would love to see him answer this upcoming season. You got to think after being a little bit embarrassed in the finals, like you mentioned. I mean, a dominant performance by the Celtics. You got to think that's going to motivate him to come in hungrier this season. So Luka at number 4 for me. Justin, who you got at number 4?
Number 4, not much to add because we already talked about him, is SGA. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander averaged 30 points last season, about 2,200 points, about 700 rebounds. Destroyed the Pelicans in the playoffs. I
Oh,
think we saw just his, again, as I mentioned earlier, his maturation process. So not too much to add there. And it's going to be interesting. We'll get to some other guys, but now it's pretty cool to see, going back to the Olympic discussion, that the USA has to face MVP candidates. You got Jokic, you got Canada with SGA, you got Luka with his team, you got all these different international squads. They have an potential MVP candidate on there, France with Victor Wembanyama. So I think it's just cool to see that's how internationally the game has grown, and for Canada as well is a big deal. And I think a shout out to Vince Carter, because I don't think he gets his fair due. And for a lot of these players, including SGA, he was really kind of the godfather of this movement. Even though Vince Carter's not from Canada, I just think him playing for the Raptors for so long just had a huge influence, on this wave of Canadians that's happening in the NBA right now. So shout out to SGA.
absolutely. Yeah. Moving right along, Justin, go ahead and give us your number 5.
Yeah, number 5, I have Kevin Durant. I've been hot and colds with him, but I just think when he is on and when he's in a situation, man, he's just really tough to beat. He is so efficient. I really like efficiency. I like players that take smart shots and that is willing to, I would say, be very smart when they're out there and not be inefficient. And Kevin Durant is that. He averaged 27 points per game last season. I would say the Suns had a disappointing end to their run. And I'm just wondering, man, just with his legacy, I know we got in kind of a debate with our friends in our text chain. Man, if he just continues to struggle, because I just see him in the Olympics, just how awesome he was, and just to see him with these other players and how he can be how he fit really well with Golden State. I'm just wondering what the deal is with this guy, because I just feel like he should have way more NBA titles. Like, I just feel like we should be talking about him as like number 1, number 2 in this league, and for him to be 5, I just find it to be such a black mark on his career. I mean, I understand how many titles he's won. I get all his accolades, but just the way his skill set is and how he can play the game and what he's overcome too, I just feel a little bit of what people say about Shaq in terms of, what Shaq did in terms of the titles that he won and he could have won more. I'm kind of feeling that way about Kevin Durant, but in a different fashion. Is that being too harsh?
I don't think so. And I think I would push that even further to say this is like a meta level discussion about this generation of basketball players.
Mm,
If you look at like LeBron saying not 6, not 7, blah blah blah, it's really kind of been a generation where, in a lot of cases, the greats of this age actually do things either in their off seasons or just different actions that they choose that cause them to back off where I think their legacies actually should have been. I feel that way about KD. I feel that way about LeBron.
mm.
And this is not to slight those players. I think you have to respect their talent wise, and ability wise. I mean, I think you can make the case KD's right up there with the great small forwards of NBA history. But in terms of what actually was achieved, that's where questions come up for me. So I don't
Yeah.
think it's unfair. Short answer to your
But
question.
but with LeBron in that discussion, besides Cleveland when he first started, I mean, the first half of Cleveland, not the second. Like, look at Miami, won a title. Cleveland, the second time, won a title. LA won a championship. I just feel like he's had those moments to where, hey, I'm going here to win a championship. He has done that. Like with those 3 tenures, where Kevin Durant, he's had all these super dream teams. I mean, Where's the title in Brooklyn? And then you take a look, and even at OKC, I mean, that was with James Harden and Westbrook. I mean, that wasn't a scrub team. I mean, I just feel like he's had all these opportunities, and in terms of actually being, and I know people say you're ring chasing and all this, but I mean, it's not like he's. I mean, you take a look at LeBron in Cleveland. I mean, his first years there, he had really terrible teams, really mediocre talent around him. Kevin Durant has not had that. So
Mhm.
I'm just wondering with Durant, I think his resume is clearly lacking for his talent level. I mean, it's blatantly clear this guy is not past his prime. I mean, look at him in the Olympics. His ability to overcome injuries, he is more than able to lead his team to an NBA title. I'm just wondering why that has not happened as much as it should.
Yeah, I don't know honestly. KD will be on my list. He'll be appearing later, but
Sure.
um, I don't know. He may be in terms of physically past his prime, but he's such an efficient player, as you correctly pointed out earlier, that his game translates so well. I mean, when you think of like the second half of Jordan's career and how he mixed things up, like KD has been able to do that. I mean, since like a few years in the league, he
Yeah.
could have such a great impact even just out on the perimeter and didn't have to go to the rack as
No.
a lot of the greats have had to do. So it's just an interesting, different narrative, of course, for a very unique player. I mean, the Slim Reaper. We've never seen a player like him up until that point. He's really kind of a unicorn, and other
Agreed.
players have. I mean, Wemby is in many ways an extension of that mold.
Sure.
Even though there are unique things about him,
Yeah.
certainly that we have not seen before as well. It's just interesting how the game is evolving like this, and we're getting into big topics here. I know. I'm sorry to stretch this, but um, yeah, I don't fault you for picking KD here. I certainly do have questions in terms of his durability and in terms of I think with the Olympics play, it is tough to fully judge because like we have that game where KD, what was it? He goes like 8 for 8, has
Yeah.
basically like the perfect game on paper, looks like something out of NBA 2K if you're just messing around and going for efficiency or whatever. KD does that. I mean, he has like an NBA 2K easy mode game right and left, becomes the Team USA all-time leading scorer, etc. But going back to the NBA season is kind of going back to you have a little bit less help around you, even though you've got a lot of talent on that Suns team. How do things look now? And you're right, he did put up great numbers last season. I'm curious to see if he can repeat that, and especially much like we talked about Giannis having a big workload, KD still kind of has a big workload. I think it's going to be a little bit better than last season, so hopefully he can stay healthy and prove that, and maybe have an outside shot at moving up on my list as well.
Yeah. No, we'll see what happens.
All right, so let's see. You just gave me your number 5, correct? I want to make
Correct.
sure I don't leapfrog anything. All right, I'm going to go for my number 5. This is a little bit with my next two picks. Some people may say I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but we now are at a point where this first player, anyway, now has some accomplishment under his belt. He was on Team USA with Kevin Durant. He eliminated Kevin Durant from the playoffs um, in Degeneration X fashion, you might say. And of course, now you know I am talking about Anthony Edwards of the Timberwolves. I have to respect your game if you are pushing the Timberwolves, no disrespect, to the Western Conference Finals. He has done that. He has been the catalyst for the change on that team. He did it in spite of inconsistency at times from Karl Anthony Towns, although overall I do think Cat had a much better
Just
playoffs than
better.
people were
Yeah.
expecting. But I think he is still somewhat in that face of the league conversation. And you and I talked about how, like, okay, let's shut down the conversation about him being Jordan or Kobe, these types of things. But he had that year that's like he got past the next hurdle. He answered some questions. Now he has to find out how to really do a good job in crunch time and solidify his jump shot if he wants to be in that same type of mold, the same type of mold even as like a Dwayne Wade was able to get to, and Dwayne Wade, that this is not to slight him because he had the highest of highs, you could argue, in 2006 when he won his first ring. So Anthony Edwards still has a long way to go as far as that goes. But in terms of the mix of youth, talent, athleticism, and that two-way player element that I love, I think Anthony Edwards belongs at least in the argument for around this top 5 area, and I'm going to put him right on the edge of it at number 5.
That's interesting. I'm going to be disrespectful. He's not even on my list.
Woo!
Yeah,
All right.
I like Anthony Edwards. I did not like his playoff performance. I just think to be elite on this list, especially when you have so much on the line, like you said, his shooting deficiencies, I hold that a lot against him. And for the players I have on this list that I can see still have some juice left in the tank, I'm going to rank them ahead of him, in my mind at least. I like Anthony Edwards a lot, but the way and again, it's his first time. A lot of the guys on my list have tenure, so I'm kind of the old man get off my lawn situation here. But until I see him kind of cross that threshold, I can't put any of the guys off of here to switch them off, in my opinion.
I think that's fair. There's still a lot to prove. Absolutely. I think point is very valid and well taken if you're looking specifically at the elimination series when they lost to Dallas, because there really was a huge shift where now it felt like Anthony Edwards can't do things he was doing the rounds before.
Agreed.
I put a lot of stock in them getting past Denver, getting over that hurdle. Granted, that's the team they were kind of built to take on. So I think we're going to get a lot of answers to this question. Guys and ladies in the chat, let us know. Do you think 5 is too high for Anthony Edwards? I think it's a valid question. I may be jumping the gun a little bit with it, but I'm going to go ahead and stick to my guns there and keep him in the number 5 position. Number 6, Justin, I'll just go ahead and go right into it.
Yeah.
This, again, maybe a jump in the gun type of situation. We saw a lot from the alien last season, so I'm going to put him here. Number 6. Now, is he going to have a sophomore slump? I want a little bit more time with him, but you see it just jump off the screen, the way Wemby changes spacing on the court. And San Antonio did not have a great season last year. Part of that is they need legitimate NBA players on their roster. I'm sorry for the guys that were on their roster this year. There are legitimate NBA players there, but let's be real. San Antonio was kind of like still in tank mode a little bit.
Yeah.
They have Chris Paul this season. I think if he's around for even a part-time role, even just to throw some lobs to Wemby and teach his teammates how to do that, that unlocks a whole nother option that Wemby has available that really has been underutilized to this point, just simply for the fact that San Antonio does not have, to this point, adequate point guard play in the Wemby era. But the way he can change the game, if he takes another step in his progression here, if he becomes a little bit more of a force on the offensive end as well, look out. I mean, he may be easily, when we're having this conversation next offseason, he may be an easy lock in the top 5. We'll see. There's still more to prove, just like with Anthony Edwards. Both of these are young guys, but I've got Wemby at 6. Justin, your thoughts, and then please lead into your number 6.
Yeah, I feel you. I'll spoil it because he's not on my list, but he's an honorable mention. I went with guys a lot with tenure, but I do see, especially from the Olympics and especially the gold medal game, just how he performed. I was truly impressed. He averaged about almost 16 points for France in the Olympics, and he scored 26 points in a gold medal game that had a lot of pressure on the line. That's a good sign because, you have the nation, backing you. You're in your host country. You're playing against all these NBA Hall of Famers, and you play that way. that shows me that he is ready to be an elite player in the league. So I don't blame you for having him that high. I'm just looking for tenure and really players that can still have that experience level. That's why he's off. But totally feel you on putting him that high. I don't blame you one bit.
And another thing, if I can just cut in, what
Yeah.
Howard Beck told us on the show is true. He cares.
Yeah.
He gives a damn. He was
Oh, yeah.
pissed off
Oh, he was
that they
crying.
lost. Yeah,
Yeah, that
he
was
was
great. It was
upset that they lost
great to
that
see.
game. I
Yeah.
love to see that.
The
Um,
passion. Yeah.
absolutely. That's all I got. So give
Yeah.
us your
No,
number 6 when you're ready, please.
No, I feel you because I think a lot of players they're very inward with the not showing those emotions. And I think again we talk about kind of the newer and older generation. I think that's wonderful to see with him, and I think that's going to carry San Antonio. That might have if they give him any type of talent around him. I think they're going to overperform because he has that mentality along with his talent. So, um, looking forward to that.
Agreed.
Quickly here, I know he was brought up in terms of him not playing too much for Team USA, but I have Jason Tatum at number 6.
Mm,
27 points per game. I really like his game. He averaged 22 points in the NBA Finals. Um, I think it's hard to really get a true assessment of his game with Jalen Brown as his teammate because they do similar things as opposed to, I think, Steph and Clay. Um, I understand they both take threes, but I think with Steph, I think there's a little bit more versatility in his game. Whereas with Brown and Tatum, I think they're so similar. But I just can't deny, just I think Tatum's been underrated so much. And I would say I would put him above Jalen Brown slightly. Um, so that's why I
I would
have
too.
him on my list at number 6. Not too much to add, but I just think it'd be a misnomer not to add him, at least to my list.
Right on. Right on. All right. So we are moving into number 7
Hmm.
territory now. Um, and at this point, I have a lot of criticisms and I think more importantly, question marks regarding this player. But this was someone who was easily, I think, in both our top threes last year when we did this ranking. You probably know where I'm going with this. He unfortunately had an MVP esque season until injuries, which has been the narrative around his career. Unfortunately, injuries took him out. I'm, of course, speaking of MVP from 2 years ago, Joel Embiid. He makes number 7 on my list. It can't be denied that when he's healthy and able to play games, he is a dominant force on both ends of the court, especially on that offensive end, though. Unfortunately, seems like the narrative on him now that he's 30 is going to be that he's just kind of a star-crossed superstar. I've of course, hope I'm mistaken. I hope we get big moments for many years to come from Joel Embiid. I'm getting less and less sure that he will ever make an NBA Finals at this point, just with how things have played out. And I think you'd kind of have to be ridiculous to not at least ask those questions at this point, just because it, it is rare that we get a season where injury is not part of the narrative, and it's sad for him, of course, and sad for basketball fans. But regardless, he's so dominant that he does still make number 7 on my list.
Yeah, we're aligned. He's number 7 on my list, and I
Mm,
was not happy by the lack of effort. And correct me if I'm wrong. I would say Joel Embiid and Giannis, they're I think contemporaries. They're compared to each other, right or wrong. That
yeah.
what you're here. So in my mind, have you ever seen Giannis be in the same sentence as lack of effort? Is that
No,
yeah,
Giannis is a hard worker. I think
yeah.
there are valid questions around Embiid's. I I don't think he doesn't care or is disinterested, but I think there is a disconnect between how much his care translates into the work that he's putting in. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. And what bothered me, again, people might say, why are you bringing the Olympics into this? Well, I think it translates to what's going to happen, in the NBA this coming season. To me, what I saw in the Olympics, that game against Serbia, where he was huge in bringing the U.S., give him credit, he was huge and giving the USA the win. But on the defensive end, where that is effort, that is passion, he just seemed lethargic out there. I was like, what is going on here? Like he just got out hustled on several plays where the game was on the line, and he was taking it from the French crowd. Like, and this is the guy who wants to crotch chop the crowd here, egg them on. I like it, I really do. But you got to like put effort out there too. And I was just not impressed in that situation where you need that rebound, didn't get it. And yeah, I just think his offense bailed him out. But honestly, if they lose that game against Serbia, I think Embiid's the one to blame. I mean, honestly. So that really bothers me in terms of what you mentioned, Matt. If he's going to be the catalyst with Paul George with the 76ers and taking him to the NBA finals, and we're in, April, May, and the game is on the line, if they're playing Giannis, who's going to have more effort? I'm going to say Giannis in terms of getting that rebound. And that's inexcusable for the player of his caliber at this point. If he's going to be considered an elite top 2 player, I mean, being out hustled, I mean, I can take missing shots. That's no problem. Ball doesn't go in. What are you going to do? But in terms of like the hustle plays, your thing of rebounding, and in terms of free throws, I just think he was very lackluster. What I saw in the Olympics, and we've seen we're factoring his injuries as well. Yeah, I am very worried about his future for sure. And this is a player I've been very high on too. I like Joel Embiid, I really do. But what I have seen this past season in the Olympics, I am concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate
Yeah.
because you see the talent and the potential and everything, but you're right on the money there. I mean, Joel Embiid is kind of like what the LA Clippers have been.
Yeah.
They kind of line up, which is kind of ironic that Paul George is joining
Right.
that team.
Good comparison. Yeah.
I think
that's
I
true.
had mentioned it on a past episode, but it's something like, and you guys can fact check me if I'm wrong, but in the past 5 seasons, there's only been one season where both Paul George and Joel Embiid played more than 60 games each.
Yeah.
So that just opens up a lot of question marks. Justin, go ahead. I'll throw it back to you for number 8 on your list, if you would, please.
Yeah, number 8, and I'll try to keep this succinct just to keep it moving. I have Steph Curry. I just think he's the greatest shooter in the game. He's the greatest shooter ever. I just think you saw the Olympics, and this goes to a number 9 pick. Clearly, might be past his prime, but like it's any kind of discussion about his retirement, I just think it's ridiculous when he is such a hard worker. Before the games, his shoot arounds have become infamous just around the sports world, just in terms of how much he prepares, and it shows when the games are on the line. So I think with a team that can complement his strengths, he still can be a factor in terms of winning another NBA title. I truly believe that. So that's why he is number 8 on my list.
I think a lot of people would have Curry on their list as well. Curry was on my list last year. He is not this year. He's just outside as an honorable mention. I think Curry is a player who relies on the rest of his team because he has deficiency on the defensive side of the ball. You kind of have to hide him. We've seen now for the past 3 seasons, if he doesn't have shoring up on the defensive end of the floor, it's tough for him to carry that effort. Now, he had a great season on the offensive side of the ball. It's just been rough in Golden State. You can't put all of that on Steph Curry. It's enough for me that I don't put him in my top 10. I don't think that's a terrible pick. He's somewhere right on the outskirts of it for me. I think most people probably would still have him in their top 10 list, if I'm being honest, though. My number 8, just to fly through real quick, I agree with a lot of the points that you brought up regarding him. And it kind of ties into what I was just mentioning about Steph Curry, but it's Jason Tatum. It's hard to fully judge him because he does have such a big, balanced team, but by all accounts, he is the leader on that team. It's a little bit of a co-pilot situation with him and Jaylen Brown, but Jason Tatum does kind of get the nod. And now I'm just realizing maybe I should be worried that Jaylen Brown is going to see this and feel snubbed yet again this offseason by me putting Jason Tatum on. Like, are we going to get some shade thrown at us on Twitter or something about like a Nike conspiracy or something with me having Jason Tatum ahead of him on our list? Jaylen Brown, I love you too, man. This is tough. We're splitting hairs here, but I think I've got to put Jason Tatum here at this point, just being kind of the lead option in crunch time situations when things really break down. He's counted on to be that guy, and he is a good two-way player, a very versatile defender, maybe not the most skilled defender on this list, but I do think that's worth a nod as well, as he can do a lot of things to mess with wings on the opposing teams as well. It's not just all about the offense with him, which I really dig.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and jump into number 9, since it's also someone we've brought up before, and that is KD. For me, he is still top 10. He's still done enough to stay in there where if you give me that he's staying healthy for the season, I still think he's a top 10 player in this league. He was pretty clearly, if you watch the games, I think the alpha and the top dog in Phoenix, which is a little bit interesting because it's kind of, Booker obviously drafted there, has the history there.
Yeah.
But he kind of did the same thing when he went to Golden State. I mean, he's just such a useful tool and a versatile, efficient scorer that it's hard not to want him as your number one option where whatever team you place him on. Like, get the ball in this guy's hands. He's going to do great things with it and just fill up the stat sheet, and especially the points per game. So give me KD at number 9. Justin, any reactions you have? And then, of course, your number 9, please.
Yeah, not much, still relevant. And again, he has a lot of, I think, questions to answer with his career. I know he's very particular about NBA history and about people poking holes in his legacy, but there are holes to be poked, especially with his talent. I think it speaks to how people think of him as one of the greatest players of this era, but I think the championships do not follow in that. So I think that's where the criticisms lie. Number 9, I got to go with LeBron. I just think, despite his age, I think LeBron is still top 10 in this league. He's so versatile. I think I'm thinking of a playoff situation where you're trying to win the title, where you can rest him throughout the season and get him ready for a long stretch of some of these meaningless playoff games. I think he's still so relevant in terms of not only what he brings on the court, but what he brings off the court. I just think he's just too valuable. And what you saw at the Olympics, I still think he has a lot left in the tank. So that's why he's number 9 for me.
Right on. He was not top 10 last year for me. I did not move him back into the top 10. It's tough because LeBron is the only guy I think so far on our list who is a top 10 all-time NBA player for sure. Like, lock that in. You can have debates about Curry. You can have debates about KD potentially, although I think he's securely out of the top 10 all time based on what we brought up earlier about career achievements and accolades. But LeBron is surefire top 10 for most people, probably top 5 in NBA history. So it's tough to hold him out of there. I think he is the second best player on his team at this point. So I have him outside of there, and I also have AD just outside looking in this top 10 list. So they're both kind of honorable mentions for me. In terms of number 10, Justin, let's just go ahead and wrap this up. Give us your number 10.
Yeah, I really like this pick, and I want to give him tons of props. That's why I put him on this list. It's Jalen Brunson.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Same here.
I just feel he's been underrated, and he is the heartbeat of the Knicks. And I think a lot of people thought it was going to be Julius Randle, right? But it's very clear with Randle getting hurt, a lot of people dismissed this team. And with Brunson, it's basically just all the injuries. You can see he was hurt. He was banged up. He earned that Knicks captain spot. And I think, finally, for hardcore basketball fans, I'm glad he's being recognized as one of the most elite players in the NBA. I think that's very apparent. And I think the Mavericks made a mistake getting rid of him. And I think you see how that the Knicks are really flourishing with him on their squad now. 28 points per game, 2,200 points last season. A great run for them. Ran out of gas, but he is the cornerstone of their franchise. And I would say there's a lot of supermax contracts in his future. That's for sure. So props to Jalen Brunson and congrats to him.
Well, Justin, I'm sure you know he did sign that team friendly extension
He did.
where he actually gave up about 37 million, but with the way they strategize that, you could argue there's also some advantages that maybe he can get to like a full super max
Sure.
sooner on that. So
Hope he
um,
does. Yeah.
I like this Knicks team. It's hard not to root for them with them kind of working together on the structure of this team. The Villanova background, of course, like very, very lovable Knicks team. For a franchise that I think everyone's excited when they're good. I don't know if I would call the like Carmelo Anthony era Knicks like this lovable like this current Knicks iteration is, because a lot of people, a little bit anti Carmelo Anthony or what have you. He rubbed some people the wrong way.
Yeah.
But I digress. I have Jalen Brunson in the same pick. I'm glad we agree on this. I really debated also with AD. I debated with Booker. I debated with Jalen Brown. Kawhi, if he had been healthier last season, I think
Yeah.
has outside shot, but we both know that was not the case and hasn't been for a while. Just to give a couple other shout outs, John Morant was in my top 10 last year. Of course, he was MIA last season, so he fell out of it. We'll see what he does. He certainly has that potential. Steph Curry, who was on your list, he's honorable mention. Tyrese Halliburton, I think, deserves a shout out with what Indiana has been doing. Donovan Mitchell as well, who is still in Cleveland. Honorable mention here with Jalen Brunson. I'm unconvinced the Knicks can do it and get all the way to the NBA Finals, or maybe contend once they get to the NBA Finals with him as the number one option. I'm skeptical. It's hard to do that, as we saw with the Allen Iverson-led 76ers back in the day. It's just tough in terms of the size thing. I do buy into that kind of question mark with this team, but how could you not love what Jalen Brunson is doing? And he has shifted the culture on the team.
Yes.
It's been more than just him that's shifted the culture on the team, but he's been a huge, huge cornerstone to that. So I love giving him the props here. And shout out to Jalen Brunson.
Yeah. No. Totally agree. Totally well deserved. And looking forward for it. I think what I'm hoping for the Knicks is to put a team around him that he doesn't have to physically expend himself to make a further playoff run. That's where my hope is. I know the Knicks have really retooled what they're doing in terms of remaking this franchise that's supposed to before chasing like really past their prime superstars. So I just hope that their development of the squad continues because he is certainly the catalyst for them.
Absolutely. Justin, before we wrap up, any honorable mentions, players that you were really close?
Yeah.
I brought up a couple players on the outside of my list. You mentioned Anthony Edwards and Wemby just being on the outside looking in as those honorable mentions. Any other players you wanted to mention?
Yeah, just those two to me. I think that they're fantastic. I think an outside player that really no one's thinking about that might be kind of like a ridiculous pick and a biased pick, but I think he really was the reason why the Bulls were even relevant
Mm,
in terms of the playoffs with DeMar DeRozan. I
mm.
think he's so efficient. Just a great time in Chicago. I know he's going to Sacramento. I think he's going to be fantastic there. I think he's an elite player in this league, and I think he deserves a shout out as well, even though I don't think he's going to be on any top 10 or top 15 list. I still think, despite him being on a pretty mediocre to bad Chicago teams, he kept them even in any type of a playoff hunt. I could say that more for him compared to Zach LaVine. That's for sure. So shout out to him.
It's kind of so on brand for DeMar DeRozan to be in that spot where
Yeah,
everyone's forgetting about him and he's kind of crushing it.
no,
So
totally
shout out
agree.
to DeMar.
Yeah,
Right on. So I want to read off my list from 1 to 10 and then have you do the same, Justin,
sure.
just to recap this. And then you guys let us know what you think. Do you think Justin's list is closer to where yours would be? Do you think mine is? And also, feel free to drop in your list if you want to go through a top 10 ranking. It's kind of a fun exercise, at least I think, every year to do. So here we go. My top 10 at number 10, Jalen Brunson. Number 9, KD. Number 8, Tatum. Number 7, Embiid. Number 6, Wemby. Number 5, Anthony Edwards. Number 4, Luka Doncic. Number 3, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Number 2, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And number 1, Nikola Jokic, the MVP from last season, 3-time MVP now. That rounds out my top 10. Justin, if you would, please give us yours.
Yeah. I got Jalen Brunson, number 10, number 9, LeBron, 8, the hero of the Olympics, Steph Curry, 7, almost the court jester of the Olympics, Joel Embiid, number 6, Jason Tatum, number 5, Kevin Durant, number 4, SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, number 3, the Greek Freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo, number 2, Luka Doncic, and number 1, the Joker, Nikola Jokic.
Awesome. Well, always so much fun having this discussion each year, Justin. Thanks for indulging me with this list
fun.
and this topic.
Yeah.
I think that kind of gives us a nice little framework as we continue in the off season and gear up towards eventually getting back into the NBA. We'll have the WNBA resuming really soon, of course. So if you're craving some basketball, be sure you stay tuned for that. Our show rolls on as normal. We will continue delivering great interviews that you guys can check out in our feed every week, and so oftentimes multiple times per week. We got to get out of here as our topic went on longer than we thought today. Stay tuned. We're going to be bringing a lot more off-season content as well. We'll probably get back into some GOAT conversation at some point too. So stay tuned for all that. For Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. Thanks for making it through to this point with us and supporting the show. We will see you next time on In the Lab with Hoopsology. Peace out.
See you next time.